That's an interesting question. Can salvation be lost? They always put that in the context of, usually, where you're going to wind up after you die. They always put that in that light. Where you're going to wind up. It's always about either going to heaven or hell. I would say this. If you really want to go by what words mean, and I insist on doing that, salvation, you have to go back to, I'm sorry, what are we delivered from? Slavery to the flesh. You see? Ignorance. And so, you have in Romans, in different parts of the Bible there, I don't know if it's Romans 6, Paul's talking to believers who had separated from the flesh, from the corrupt nature. And he says, for you have died. You see, and it's not in terms of you were died, in terms of God views you as having been punished and put to death. No. For you have died, which you have put off the flesh. You see the idea of the true circumcision. You see what I mean? It's putting off of the flesh, the corrupt nature. And so, I don't know how you go back into ignorance. How do you forget what you've learned? The problem with a lot of people is they haven't learned the right stuff to begin with, so they're not really delivered. I mean, if you have false doctrines, you're still suffering from ignorance. You see, those that are deceived. But once you do get the truth, I would like to know how you go back to ignorance. Well, you really can't, can you? And being enslaved to the flesh, I would like to know how you get re-enslaved to it. First of all, you didn't deliver yourself from it anyways. And when you put it in the context of aid from God, they always kind of put it in the context if you go out and sin or you do whatever, or you act unfaithfully or begin to doubt or I don't know what. And they rationalize and always wind up with the most severe thing. Well, you see, look, the guy's sinning and he's doing this, and so you see he's not operating in the faith, and so you see he's outside the faith, and so then naturally you see what's going to happen is he's going to go to hell. I mean, they do stuff like that. But how do you get re-enslaved? You have to talk about what you're saved from and go back to that originally. You see, enslaved to the flesh, the corrupt nature. Do you see how, in order to go back to that, it certainly is not God pulling the rug out from under you and you become re-enslaved because God ain't helping you out, you see. And that's why the context is where Paul is talking in Romans 6. He says, should we go back, to sin who have been freed from it, basically, to paraphrase. Of course not, man, never be. And so I would say, if one decides to sin, then that is what one has decided to do. That does. I fail to see how that makes one enslaved to the corrupt nature. And you could say that he's returning to those instincts, but that doesn't mean he's trapped in there and God says, nope, I'm not going to help him. Where's that at? And so when you have deliverance, which is we have the aid of God, in order for you to be unsaved or undelivered again, God would have to basically withhold all of his aid and leave you like that. Now, that's where they sort of bear false witness. They'll go like this. Well, look at this guy. He's down at the bar. He's shrinking. And look, he's messing around, fornicating or something. And they'll go, well, you see, obviously he lost his salvation. What does that mean? They lie about offenses. If you go out and have too much to drink, I don't think that's the decision that you don't want to have anything to do with God anymore. And so they bear false witness like that, and they give the most grave implications. And so they'll go, you see, look, the guy drank. Look, so obviously he returned to sin, and so you see how he returned to sin. He's turning away from God, therefore he's going to hell. And you see, that's some kind of hysterical weirdo, making all those ramifications. Isn't it Pharisees that condemn you for a speck? Pretend it's a mountain or something. They got a mountain out of a molehill. So what are they going to say? Like about Noah. Noah had a little too much to drink. Well, you see, look, he turned to sin. There he is, turned away from God. So therefore, he's going to hell. He lost his salvation. Say the same thing with, David with adultery and Bathsheba. The lesser offenses are not the greater one. I thought the thing that was unforgivable, the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, since he witnesses the truth to all men. The blasphemy against all other things shall be forgiven. It's fascinating. The blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, which is the rejection of his witness, knowing that it's the truth. Now, you're going to have to say that somebody's going to have to do that as a believer. And first of all, they have to be totally delivered to begin with. You have these people arguing salvation and the loss of it, and none of them are delivered. They're still walking according to the flesh. They view God as though he's more corrupt than the average corrupt man. They don't even know what deliverance is, and they're trying to argue the loss and all of that. They don't even know what it is. They're arguing faith plus works, and they don't even know what deliverance is. The false doctrines are tailored according to the sin nature's reactions. The false doctrines are the exact opposite of the truth. The sin nature, so you see the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's witness. The sin nature opposes the Spirit at every turn. False doctrines oppose the Spirit at every turn. Anybody who believes false doctrines, they are walking according to the flesh and they have not been delivered, and they're sitting around with PhDs and doctorates arguing if a person can lose their salvation. Well, you know what? I would say this. If a man actually did turn away from the truth on purpose, lie against the truth on purpose, and all of that, one could argue, well then he deserves what he gets, right? But I would say this. There is something called maturity, and it's volitional maturity, and it has to do with the person's preference. And people make up their minds, and at some point they are not going to change. So a lot of people are worrying about people losing their salvation, and they don't even understand really what salvation is. They don't even understand that they're not even delivered from the ignorance. They're spreading it around, the satanic accusations against God, which are according to the flesh. And so they think according to the flesh, because the satanic doctrines are according to the flesh, and they're not delivered, and they're sitting around discussing, whether salvation could be lost or not, and they haven't been delivered in the first place. And so how do you get back to being enslaved to the flesh? How do you get back to the ignorance? You see, first of all, the rejection of Christ is not your original state. The rejection of Christ is not the original state of man. The rejection of Christ is a whole new crime. And so, you see the idea of salvation is lost, which means the deliverance is undone. You go back to your original state. The rejection of Christ is not the original state of man. And so I would say those people do not know what they're talking about. The rejection of Christ is a whole new crime. And it's a whole new state. It's acquiring the state of Satan, knowing what you're doing, lying against the truth, knowing it's the truth. And you see, that's not deliverance undone, going back to man's original state. Because you see, mankind in his original state, he ain't destined for hell anyways. So you see, in order to get sent to hell, you have to commit a whole new crime. And it isn't drinking on the weekends.